And we're in week 3 of the Chris Brecht State Farm Insurance Coaches Show here on 1360 WOW. I'm Matt Jarvie, and with me, Coach Rocco Dobran. Good to be with you, Coach.
Oh, great to be here today.
Hey, it was nice to get back on track again here against the John Adams Rebels. A lot of talent on that team. You were absolutely right about that. They had quite a few guys that could do some things very, very well, but in the end, Spartans just wore them down.
Yeah, I think our kids played very well. They stayed patient, even though, we had a lot of turnovers, which has to be fixed. But they never, lost focus and they just kept playing hard, So it was a scary first half. And then, the second half we held on to the ball and didn't turn it over, and things kind of went our way.
Do you think any of their guys, I don't know if any of the, Robert Ramsey, I would think some people are probably keeping an eye on him.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, I didn't hear anything in particular, but they definitely had a couple of guys that have got to be, at least looked at that D1 level.
And then they could throw the ball and run the ball pretty well, too, at certain times. But your defense kept just sticking with it, and eventually I think they got control of the game.
Absolutely. It was kind of that bend but don't break sometimes. We'd give up the ball on offense, cause a turnover. They'd drive a decent distance to the field, and then we'd hold them before they could score, and so it was a good plus for them. And then when they did score, it was all big plays. It was their receivers faster than our corner type thing. So
okay, yeah,
we saw a lot of that.
A couple of official calls that we talked about them in the booth, and we said we'd try to get an answer for anyone listening here this Friday night for what happened. And one of them was the inadvertent whistle, so they thought was blown when the extra point was tried.
Yeah, it was a very, very odd situation. I'd never seen it, but they blew the whistle. They said once the ball crosses the line of scrimmage, they can blow the whistle. So there's no extracurriculars going on at the line of scrimmage. And I thought it was a little earlier. Our kicker thought it was a little earlier, but those are one of the things you just listen, say okay, and move on.
So he felt like it had broken his concentration a little bit.
Absolutely, yeah, he did.
Well, it's a moot point, but there could come a time later on where you need that point.
Absolutely.
We just hope that it doesn't happen when we get in that. Another one was a kickoff too as well, and usually they were lining up on the 40, but they had their line go back to the 35 and get a running start. We thought it was offsides, but it really wasn't. What happened with that one?
Yeah, you only get a 5-yard head start, and I think only one kid went beyond that 5 yards. He got like a 7 or 8 yard head start, so that was a flag. And then on the other end, there was an inadvertent whistle again by one of their referees. So we just kind of got the ball where our guy had the ball when the whistle was blown, plus we got the 5 yards on the penalty. So it worked out in our favor, kind of. But again, it was just and the good thing about the reffing crew is they did talk about all that stuff and get it fixed without just jumping out to an answer that's not right. They talked and said, how are we going to handle this? So.
We talked about it before we started recording for the coaches show here, but we were discussing in the booth last week about, there were so many great performances out there that it was difficult to come up with the Dairy Queen player of the game. Maybe I pulled the final string to call it for Mike Williams, and he had just a wonderful, wonderful game, and it was important to get him back on track, I felt, for the future success of the team. But Ryland Davidson and other players did extremely well.
Yeah, when it comes up to a bunch of kids, there's no wrong answer, and Mikey Williams had 200-plus rushing game and a touchdown.
Yeah.
So just a phenomenal game, and he is definitely well deserving of any award that he gets. And Ryland had one of those special games that I don't think he needs an award just to know how, you're not going to see it very often if it's ever happened. But I know that he threw for a touchdown, he ran for a touchdown. He caught a touchdown pass, and then he had an interception and a sack also. So he kind of did it everywhere, and his interception probably came in one of the most important times of the game because they had just beat our corner deep the previous series, and then we switched him to corner, and then they tried that same play about 3 plays later, and he had an interception. And then plus he had 130 yards rushing. So I think, it's one of them games that he'll always be able to say, I had a game where this happened, and
Absolutely.
So it'll be very special to him in any regards.
In fact, because usually we do an offensive and defensive, but with him, he was doing it on both sides of the ball, and
he absolutely was.
It was incredible. It was like a hat trick or a triple double, or
right.
I don't know what you'd call it.
Absolutely, and it was funny because so once he went on quarterback, then we're like, oh, we got to kind of spell him on defense, take him out a little bit on defense more. But everyone else picked up the pace on defense, and actually Mikey ended up going to corner, and then he got an interception. So Mikey got an interception there too.
Yeah, it was
so
great.
So those guys just all played well.
Tell us a little bit about the line. That seemed to come together too as well. You worked hard all week long, I'm sure of that, but tell us how that seemed to come about, at the beginning of the game and as it progressed.
Yeah, the offensive line did a great job, and it was a little bit of that consistency that we talked about last week. We didn't have it because of the injury, so we went into this. Hey, here's where we're going to go for now. And Damon Bowers went to center and did a great job, and that put Wiley at right guard, and we put Hunter Dale in, who was the extra guy, in at left tackle, and it kind of just gelled. And as you watch film, the week before we put Wiley at center, and he wasn't prepared yet for it. He only had like a day to practice, not even a full day, like a half a day to practice. Not only learn the plays, but get the snap down. So we put him in a spot where he was more comfortable, and he really had a great game.
Yeah.
Let alone with those other guys doing a great job up front, and Logan Johnson at right tackle. So, but you just watch it, and they were driving kids, and they were getting on bodies.
Absolutely, and some big bodies too.
Yes, absolutely, and that's it. And that was the key. Their kids very athletic. But they had a hard time finding the ball. And while they were waiting to find the ball, our linemen were hitting them. Yeah. And then our running backs kind of did their thing. So
and it was I realize as we go through the season here, we're going to find out real quick that, like we talked about before, LeBray is probably the best team we'll play all year. But they were able to really punch some holes in that line, and it's a big line, too, that they had to do that, too, in order to get those holes in there for Seth Fedor and Mike Williams.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Ryland.
Yeah. And Seth also had a good game, too,
Yeah.
I think he had at least one long touchdown called back, and some penalties there that were just very good blocking effort penalties too. They were penalties, but they were just like we held on like a second too long, So yeah, I mean up front, if they just cause some holes there, I think the backfield's going to do their job.
So we're moving on this week here, this Friday night, playing a team that you'd never seen before, the Lakeview High School Sailors down in Stoneboro. Just a little bit south of Sandy Lake, and most people don't know where that is either. So that's probably about 15, 20 minutes south of Meadville, right off of 79. So it'd be pretty easy to get to, I think. But we don't know much about them. But, I mean, I'm looking at their roster. A lot of players on their team, a lot of coaches that help out, too. I mean, they got a pretty good-sized program.
Yeah, it sure looks like they, and you watch film, and I know their scores aren't, where they want them to be, obviously. But they definitely show some progress in some areas. Early in both games, they were moving the ball, and they would get down, inside the 30 or 40, and then they'd kind of stall out or, get a turnover. So, it was those little things, and then I think, once they lose their confidence, they lose their confidence, just like a lot of teams do once they go down a couple touchdowns.
Yeah.
And it's their first year. It's their first year with this new coach, and we all know how that goes. The first year with a new coach, they change up some things. So there's a learning curve there. So I'm sure they'll get better week to week as they go here.
And they've come off a couple of just terrible losses for those guys, so I'm sure they're a bit beside themselves. But you got to go in this game with everything you got, right? Because you never know if they're like a wounded animal.
Absolutely, and they're going to be searching to get better, and they're going to, if you give them a little bit of belief, they're going to be right there. And we've seen it happen to us in the past. Those things you learn from. I know a couple of years back we lost to a champion team that wasn't as good as us. And it cost us the playoffs probably. 2 years ago, we lost to a Harbor Creek team that only won 2 games. We didn't lose. We beat Harbor Creek, but we beat them 21-14 and had like 6 turnovers, and they only had like 2 wins. Yeah. That was the year we won the conference, but that game was ugly. You know what I mean? Right. So, we have those learning experiences in the last 2 to 3 years that we're like, there's no team to take lightly ever.
Yeah.
You just got to go and take one game at a time and play.
You're going to just try to execute similarly the way you did against John Adams?
Yeah, we're going to kind of go with our spread offense and try to get their numbers one way or another, and then go opposite their numbers, and that's just kind of what we do. And I think we got a good dynamic going with the running back / quarterback with Ryland in there, and who has the ball? Is it Mikey? Is it Fedor? Is it Ryland? And then Chance Ryan's doing a good job with getting in there as a fourth guy. And then when we pass, we want to be effective. So and we're going to start Ryland this week. So he kind of earned that spot. He did a great job last week, and I don't you can't really question that. And then we're still going to use Brandon. Brandon's still going to come in and when he needs to. He hurt his finger there, so a couple of those short throws, interceptions, we didn't realize how bad his throwing finger hurt, but he couldn't get any pop behind it. That's why those balls were so short.
Oh, okay. That's why he came out initially, was because of an injury then.
Yeah, it was a combination combination. I was like, because after the first interception, he didn't want to tell me his finger hurt. I saw him when he heard it. He was holding his hand, but he didn't tell me how bad it affected him. Then after the interception, I'm like, he didn't want to blame his finger, which I give him credit. And then after the second one, I'm like, what is going on? And he's like, Coach, I'm really trying to follow through, and I can't with my finger. And he goes, I don't want to make an excuse, and he's just a great kid. Either way, he's gonna, once that thing heals, he's still gonna sling the ball around a little bit. I just think our offense is it's harder for the defense to read when you got a quarterback that can run the ball like Ryland.
Oh, and he threw very, very well too.
So, and I expect Brandon now, if that's not his focus to be that number one quarterback, I think he's going to go out a receiver, and I think people are going to be impressed with his skills out there.
I bet they would. Yeah, and that's a nice tall receiver that you would have too. It would be wonderful.
He's got some good speed. He runs good routes, and all quarterbacks can catch because they always play catch, right?
Oh yeah, that's true.
So
ball's always coming back to him.
They can throw and it comes back to him. So he's still going to have a special year, even though Ryland just puts us in a better spot, a little bit more dynamic, I guess I should say.
Coach, we appreciate that. We're looking for a win down here in Stoneboro, and then head back up to Jocelyn Field for our next game against Iroquois.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This has been another edition of the Chris Brecht State Farm Insurance Coaches Show here on 1360 WOW.